Today's talk is titled Whitman, Democracy, and Us, to be delivered by Ken Reed Brown. Reverend Ken Reed Brown is Minister Emeritus at First Parish in Hingham Old Ship Church, having retired in 2022 after 35 years as minister there. Ken lives in Hingham, Massachusetts with his wife, Susan. They have 3 grown and married children and 7 grandchildren. Ken earned a BA in philosophy from Haverford College and his Master's of Divinity from Stars King School for the Ministry in Berkeley, California. He currently serves as co-chair of the Interfaith Committee, which organizes the Listening to Other Voices speaker series at Glastonbury Abbey in Hingham, and on the Communications Committee of Elders Climate Action.
Good morning, everyone. Afternoon here on the East Coast, a beautiful fall afternoon. It's good to be with you all again. I've lost track of how many times since the beginning of the pandemic, but I always enjoy being among you, even if at 3,000 miles distance through the amazing miracle of technology. Good to be here, and many thanks to all those who make these services possible, certainly Randy and Mary, and this morning, and I'm sure I'm leaving people out, but this morning, Margot graciously leading as our worship host. So thank you for inviting me again. It's good to be with you, as I say. Now, before I get to commenting on Whitman, which I will surely do, a few words from Garrison Keillor. You remember Garrison Keillor. He still is at it, doing shows in small towns, and he writes a column each week, sometimes twice a week. And here's some of what he wrote, just a little bit, in his column this past week. He said, "I am looking forward to November 6th, when we will return," he said, "to enjoying our lives, watching the weather, maybe reading a classic or two, maybe read aloud to a child, perhaps take a walk out of earshot of freeways, maybe astonish a distant relative by writing a letter longhand in ink, offering your humorous take on life as you observe it, maybe deal with the boxes of junk in the back of your closet." Well, it seems to me Garrison may have been a little too optimistic about an immediate return the day after Election Day to what we might call our normal lives, free of anxieties about the election and about the fate of our democracy. But perhaps you, as I, can relate to his yearning to return to enjoying our lives, to simple pleasures and concerns. This said, one thing I'd like to affirm today is that maybe we can and should find ways to have it both ways. In other words, there's nothing wrong and much right with enjoying the things in our lives that we're able to enjoy with gratitude for these gifts, our ordinary lives, at the same time as we fully participate in life, which includes fully participating in the project, as we might call it, of democracy. Participation which, as Whitman affirmed, you heard him, and which is pretty much a cliche of democracy, goes well beyond those few moments in the voting booth or when we drop our ballot in the drop box, and includes pretty much every aspect of our lives, as he put it, in religion, literature, colleges, and schools. Democracy, which he always capitalized in this essay, democracy in all public and private life, he wrote. Now, in this long essay, actually, was a compendium of 3 essays he'd been writing just after the Civil War, Whitman declared over and over again that democracy then, and we might add always, certainly now, is an unfinished project. Historian Heather Cox Richardson, some of you may follow her letters from an American, she has put it this way: simply, the true history of American democracy is that it is never finished. I think really that's the nature of democracy, because we always have to be working at it, right? Now, to give an idea as to how far we had to go as of 1871, when Whitman's essay was published, At the outset of Democratic Vistas, Whitman goes on for pages about the parlous current state at the time of American society and affairs, and that means American democracy. The corruption, the self-seeking, the caring for material gain and advancement. I don't know if any of that sounds familiar to you. Here's what he wrote, just 2 lines. He said, society in these states is cankered, crude, superstitious, and rotten. Never was there, perhaps, more hollowness at heart than at present. Words that may sound all too familiar to us these days. But Walt Whitman was Walt Whitman. He had optimism somehow at the core of his being, even having just lived with the nation through the Civil War, tended to soldiers who were healing from horrific injuries in the hospitals in Washington, D.C. He was optimistic to his core, sometimes known as the poet of democracy. So he had more to say beyond bemoaning the then state of post-Civil War American life. In fact, he was certain, as we heard him allude to in that reading, he was certain that though it might take generations, democracy would flower, and that flowering would of necessity have to manifest, as we heard, in every aspect of our lives. Every dimension of our lives and community, education, the arts, literature, and certainly including religion and the moral dimensions of our lives. And here's where the us in my sermon title, Whitman, Democracy and Us, comes in. I don't only mean us as individuals, whoever we might be, wherever we are, but us as Unitarian Universalists, us in your congregation, in my congregation, in our denomination, us. I'm afraid the sun is creating a lot of glare here, my apologies. Us. Our Unitarian Universalist principles and values call us to more than our private lives. They also inform our private lives, to be sure. But if we're true to our stated values in the newly adopted Article 2, such qualities as justice, equity, interdependence, and generosity, all grounded in love, and if we're true to our stated principles, the inherent worth and dignity of every human being, the free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the interdependent web, use of the democratic process, all of that, then we must be committed to doing our part in the ever unfinished project of democracy. Most especially when democracy feels to be most under threat and more fragile than ever, as most Americans across the political spectrum, each for their own reasons, tell pollsters that they are, that we are. Okay, then what might that look like for us ordinary folks? Most of us not in positions of huge influence or power. And here's the thing, we each do have our spheres of influence, however modest they might seem to us. Each of us only one, nobody is more than one, right? Whatever else you might take from my thoughts today, you can take this. Some examples. If we are parent, grandparent, aunt, uncle, we have influence through our words and deeds over with the children in our lives, young people. And whenever our work in the world is most obvious for things like teachers and professors, for public officials at whatever level, from school committees, school boards, on up, so to speak. But it's also the case that whatever we do, whatever our work is, wherever we are, we have a role to play in enriching and strengthening our democracy, however modest it might seem to us, right? I know you and your congregation, you've got your social justice work, your social service work. I recently learned a fine new phrase. It was new to me. Maybe I'd heard it, but I'd forgotten. Maybe some of you are familiar with it. Simple 2 words, civic catalyst. Civic catalyst, which we each can be. Catalyst is someone who makes things happen. I mean, in chemistry, a catalyst is something that makes a chemical reaction happen, right? The idea here is that each of us, again, in whatever sphere of our lives, contributes to the democratic process and project. And we express our opinions. Every time we add our name to a petition for this or that, or sign a letter to a government official, business leader, agency. Every time we do any of these things, every time we talk to a neighbor about some issue, or maybe a neighbor with whom we don't agree about much, and not necessarily talking about that issue, but we're forging bonds of community. Community is the bedrock of democracy, of course. In all these ways, we are being civic catalysts, helping things to happen, helping to strengthen our democracy. I work with Elders Climate Action. We give people opportunities to sign on to letters and petitions and so on. We are trying our best to be civic catalysts and to encourage others to be civic catalysts. The things that we do or say ripple out in ways we can never measure, but they do ripple out, make a difference, for good or ill, depending on what we've done and said. So in short, we never need to be mere bystanders. We never are mere bystanders, just hoping for the best. There are so many ways we can, to use Marge Piercy's phrase, that we can be of use in this world of ours. And all this matters, no matter who wins the presidential election. I mean, I could give a partisan talk here if I wanted, so could each of you, but that's not what this is about. Whoever wins the presidential election or wins the House or Senate, however we might feel about it, beyond Election Day, no matter what, beyond Inauguration Day, we have to keep on. It's our only choice. There'll be work to do, no matter who wins. Now, the story is told, whether apocryphal or not, you've probably heard this, many of you or most of you, that when Benjamin Franklin was leaving the Constitutional Convention, which had just completed its work all these centuries ago, he was stopped by a woman. Of course, it was all men inside the room. There was a woman who stopped him with her concern. Elizabeth Willing Powell, asked him, well, what have we got, a republic or a monarchy? He said, you maybe have heard this quoted, he said, a republic, if you can keep it. Who is the you? It's every one of us in every generation, of course. Indeed, the work of democracy is never done, and it's good work that we share. And indeed, one of the gifts of democracy is that it encourages us in such work, encourages community and involvement in helping one another. And the project of democracy, indeed, does not hit pause after every election day. What a gift this is, the gift of freedom to speak our minds, to express our opinions, whether popular or not, the gift of freedom to do as we please, as long as we don't harm another. This gift of encouragement to work together for a common cause. Might be as a poll watcher, or working for some issue, or it might just be helping to clean up after a storm or wildfire. Yes, we all do have opportunities and ways of contributing to the common good, strengthening the fabric of our community, which means the fabric of our democracy, by using the many levers of democracy open to us. Now, we fear the threats to our democracy. What if a time came when those levers of democracy were threatened even more dramatically than many of us feel they are today? Well, I've been deeply inspired recently by reading, perhaps some of you have been reading too, some of the letters from prison written by Alexei Navalny, a Russian dissident. He died this past February, as you know, most likely murdered by his Russian captors. His optimism and strength, as reflected in what he wrote in his last months and weeks and days, was quite astonishing. He never let go of his conviction that Putin's regime would fall and democracy would triumph. Now, to begin with, why did he return to Russia a few years ago, pretty well knowing what his fate was likely to be? Here's what he wrote the month before his death. He said, I have my country and my convictions. I don't want to give up my country or betray it. If your convictions mean something, you must be prepared to stand up for them and make sacrifices if necessary. Then he wrote, by coming back to Russia, I fulfilled my promise to voters. There need to be some people, he said, there need to be some people in Russia who do not lie to them. And of the regime, he wrote in some of his final words, days before he was murdered, lies and nothing but lies. It will crumble and collapse. The Putinist state is not sustainable. One day we will look at it and it won't be there. Victory is inevitable, he said. But for now, we must not give up, and we must stand by our beliefs. Now, I trust that the situation in our, of course, imperfect, as it has been for all the generations of this republic of ours, I trust that the situation in our beloved, if imperfect, United States of America never reaches the point where Navalny's level of sacrifice becomes essential to save or restore our democracy. I do not believe it will. There are too many, we here are among them, too many who will not let it be so. What we do or say, as I've said, or fail to say, matters. In this spirit, keeping in mind that the highest office of the land is not the president, but citizen, that's us. May we all continue to be keepers of the flame of democracy, the flame that, among so much else, enables us to bring our deeply felt values and commitments, Unitarian, Universalist, or otherwise, not only to the voting booth or drop box, but also to the marketplace of ideas, to the work we do every day, however humble it might seem. Our work for justice and freedom and love, with love, always love, helping and healing as best we can. Now that may have sounded like the end of my sermon. But here's a second ending, which is something a preacher should never do. It's not long. Don't worry. Most Wednesdays, the last year and a half or so, we, my wife Susan and I, spend with our granddaughter Molly. Our other 6 grandchildren live in New York City, but Molly is nearby. And we spend her, she's 21 years old, 21 months old now. It'll be 21 years before we know it. She's 21 months old. She's a toddler, right? She is, of course, oblivious to everything beyond her parents, her home, her daycare, us, and so on. Just doing what babies and toddlers do, learning and growing and being as cute and funny as can be. Every week, something else. But oblivious to such things as elections and wars and the climate crisis. And most days I spend some time, if only a moment or two, out on our little deck right here, appreciating the scene of our backyard. We have a small backyard, but extends into wetland and woods that are undeveloped, so we see quite a scene. You can see some of it behind me here. This season, it's the splendidly beautiful panorama of leaves coloring and falling, and then I see the squirrels chasing each other and the birds calling and on and on. All of this too, this life, oblivious to elections, to wars, to the climate crisis, though of course the climate crisis affects our granddaughter Molly as she grows up. It affects the fabric of life here, but even so, Molly, in the midst of what she doesn't and can't know yet, continues to do her best to grow and learn. It's what babies and toddlers do, just as what we call the natural world, as we are of course part of it, does its best to adjust to changing climate. The lesson for me in all this, we are meant, by whom or what I do not know, but echoing Garrison Keillor, we're meant to enjoy this life as best we can, and motivated by gratitude for the gifts of our lives and by all that we know that is at stake. We're also meant to do our best to contribute. We want to do our best to contribute to this life we share, nourishing our spirits as we need to in worship services like this, sitting outside, being with small children, and then moving outwards to help heal the world, our communities, and the wider world. So on behalf of all life, great and small, we must keep on, grounded in love, that experience deep within that we are all one family, one fabric of life. Yes, we must keep on together regardless of what the next days and weeks, months bring. For though we don't know, we can't know what the future will bring. What we do know, what we can know and must affirm, is what we can choose to bring to the future. So may it be. Blessed be, and amen.